So you just witnessed the summary of my call to ministry given to my friends at my ordination a little over a year ago. And that actually is a hymn in our hymnal that they were singing. And when I first heard it, just randomly, it just really spoke to me. So that's why I wanted to make sure it was used in my ordination. And then I thought it was important to use it again today. Carrie's words, Carrie is the woman, our neighbor, who spoke during that part, they're particularly noteworthy. She said, "Jim will need a community to minister to. It's what he does." Friends, you matter to me because you're a very important part of my ministry, even in a small way. Ever since I tested the waters of preaching at the lay-led fellowships in the area about 10 years ago, I've told anyone to listen that will listen that that's who I feel called to. It was on my application to Meadville Lombard, and I said it twice in front of the committee that clears you for ordination with the UUA. And I actually got a response often like, we rarely see anybody that comes in front of us that is so specific about what they want to do with their ministerial calling. So it feels very important to me, and I'm very glad that you're a part of this. You matter to me because you've accepted me and my ministry, like I said, even in a small way. And I believe it's just the beginning of a vibrant ministry with the congregation I serve. And my ministry will grow to matter to all who join this congregation and in turn to those we serve in the wider Fond du Lac community. You matter to me. So then why does this fellowship matter? Why does a fellowship matter? So I'm going to share some examples because I've witnessed firsthand the power of a healthy and a vibrant Unitarian Universalist fellowship and what the impact they can have on our community. I've been a member of the Fox Valley Fellowship for 24 years. And we've grown up together, essentially, in the sense that our faith has matured together, me as an individual and them as a congregation. So you have to keep in mind that 24 years ago, when we became a part of that community, there are about 125 members or something now back then, and now I think there are 750. So they've had this huge influence in the community over that time. So it all started, some of you have heard this story, I believe, so I'll be brief, but it all started with the story of the director of religious education at the time, Ann Barker. We had moved to town from Minneapolis, and we were visiting a bunch of churches, trying to church shop. My wife and I have both grown up, always going on Sunday morning. It's a part of our spiritual practice. And we've been going to a different church in town. It was a big music church, had a lot of people I knew, very friendly. But you heard about my daughter. Well, her disabilities, one of the problems was that she had no impulse control. So, and to this day, she still has problems for it. And so it required at that age somebody to watch her, like you had to be assigned to her specifically. When we'd go to a store, we'd look at each other and go, who has her? Because she would wander off and just be gone in an instant. So even though this church was very nice and friendly and everything, every time we'd go to the nursery, you could just tell from the body language, like, oh boy, this is going to be a lot of work. And we just didn't feel like that welcome. So we had checked out this Unitarian Universalist Fellowship because we'd heard about them in Minneapolis. And felt like it was a good place for us. So we went to the director of religious education and kind of explained our situation. And without blinking, without a moment's hesitation, she said, well, we'll just accommodate you and your family. And what she didn't realize at the time, that was such a huge blessing to us because we were miserable. And it was so important for us to be able to come someplace on a Sunday morning where you could sit and feed your spirit with adult thoughts and know that your daughter and we had an infant son at the time as well, were taken care of somewhere in the building. And they followed through with it. And it was just a huge blessing to us. And then over time we realized that the fellowship became known as a place where special needs families could bring their kids. Because at that first church we were at, even though they were pretty liberal and all this, you just kind of felt like there was a certain expectation on behavior, that if you didn't meet that, something was going to be a problem. In this congregation, you know, if a little kid ended up running around during the service like this, nobody cared. I mean, you couldn't be chaos, but it just was so much more laid back, and we felt so much more accepted that was just, it felt like our family mattered to them. In fact, during the worst periods of all of this, my wife went through a lot of depression, and there was a goddess group that she had joined, and those women were so important to her, and some of them are still her best friends, that really supported her in many, many ways for her to get through it. And then I felt so supported that I ended up giving back. There were 2 services, and so we would always go to one service, and then my wife would take the kids home, and I'd volunteer in the second service for the Sunday school classes. I was either the teacher or the assistant in a classroom where there was somebody with a kid with a disability, mostly Asperger's and that kind of thing back then. And I've heard a comment over and over again at this fellowship from people who've gone through all kinds of things, illnesses, family separations, the struggles of depression, that the Fox Valley Fellowship is a place where you feel you don't have to put on your happy face to show up. You can just be your authentic self and feel like it matters to people there. Now, they went through a program, and I think you've gone through it here, in fact I know you have, to become a welcoming congregation. So this, for those of you that aren't aware, it's a process where you actually have a lot of discussions and you check some boxes to make sure that you're welcoming to the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and generally queer community. And then you get a certification. Well, the Fox Valley went through that same certification, but at the same time, there was a woman named Dottie who had moved from Los Angeles to the Fox Valley for her job and started coming to the fellowship. And at a church picnic, she met Rosie, the love of her life, and they ended up getting married. And then eventually Dottie decided that this place was so special to her. She'd never been Unitarian Universalist before. That this place was so special to her, she gave up her, she was the CFO of a small insurance company. She gave it up, went to seminary, and became our associate minister up there. And so then, of course, it didn't take very long for us to become known as the gay church. And so it just, and so you got more and more folks coming that felt that it was okay to hold hands in a service or put your arm around your partner if they were the same sex, and they felt very comfortable and that they mattered. In recent years, the congregation has embraced the struggle against systemic racism, particularly the Black Lives Matter movement, and most recently, they voted to become a sanctuary congregation. Now, they had already been a sanctuary congregation. For those of you that don't know, sanctuary congregation means that if someone is going to be deported and it doesn't appear like they're getting due process, it's a place for them to receive sanctuary. Traditionally, they won't be taken away or deported as long as they're within a church's walls. And so people were ready for, if that happens, that someone can live there until they get due process. So they voted to do this. Now, they had been one in the 1980s and had someone stay there, actually from El Salvador, for about 3 months. But they decided to recommit since it had been 40 years in the meantime, and they wanted to make sure that the current congregation was all for it. And one of the really cool things about this is the daughter of one of the original people who led it is now the leader of this movement. So it's just this cool thing that's come full circle. Now, this work is hard stuff, because it represents a culture shift in the mindset of the congregation, for them to be ready to support those who aren't very much like them at the time that they say that they're ready to support them. In fact, I've noticed, I'm not there very much because I'm actually here or some other place on a Sunday morning, but when I am there, I've noticed that the congregation is ever so slowly becoming ethnically and culturally more diverse than it ever has been. And I think it's likely because of the visibility of these types of programs. So over the past 24 years, we have found the Fox Valley Fellowship to be a place where everybody matters. Just like the little children's story I did earlier, they've worked really hard to say that everybody matters even when somebody's not like the others. For this reason, the Fox Valley Fellowship matters to the people already part of the congregation and to the larger community. And that fellowship matters because it has become one of the most vibrant and fastest growing Unitarian Universalist congregations in the country. And I believe this fellowship matters already to the Fond du Lac community. It will matter more and more as we grow and become a stronger presence here. So, okay, these are all big, lofty ideas. What's the recipe for success? I thought about it, and to me it boils down to 4 C's. And based on what I've observed, they come down to these: compassion, community, covenant, and commitment. I'll repeat them. It's compassion, community, covenant, and commitment. So let me unpack these a little bit, starting with compassion. I'll repeat the Emily Dickinson poem because I think it's the heart of this. If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto its nest again, I shall not live in vain. For me, that sums it up very nicely. If a religious organization doesn't exist to promote peace, well-being, and to ease all the kinds of suffering, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and even the pain of injustice, then why do we exist? I feel like we're living in vain. Otherwise, we're a social club, a lecture series, a learning institution, or maybe even a special interest political movement supporting things like stopping global warming or promoting marriage equality. But are we then a religious organization? It begins with compassion. To dwell on a theme from a previous sermon of mine here, compassion is grounded in the belief that everyone is worthy of being loved. Everyone matters. And we demonstrate that worthiness by striving to ensure that everyone can be what they are meant to be, that everyone should live to their fullest potential. As a congregation, we do that both internally and externally. Internally, we should be practicing radical acceptance and a celebration of diversity. Externally, we should be out there in the forefront of social justice issues, social action benefits and actions, and becoming known as an oasis where something different is going on. Becoming known for our actions and our words, and I think we're already well on that way. A place where we're known for our compassion. And we matter because very few organizations, and even fewer faith organizations, faith-based groups, can do what we do. Few are grounded in what we believe and how we approach religious community. We matter to so many because of our compassion, and I think that will only grow over time. So the second area is community. We each could do compassion, frankly, on our own. Why should we do it in community? We're all compassionate people. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be here this morning. Well, community is where diversity thrives. It's kind of hard to be diverse by yourself. Community can support complex relationships and change. We all have different histories, we all have different social styles, and so when you've got someone that needs to be supported in community, usually there's someone that's a good match for that. And as an individual, you might not be the best match. Community builds strength. We're much stronger together than we are apart. And we need one another to build the world we hope for. I have to give you an idea of community in this broad sense. So parting back again to the Fox Valley Fellowship, my daughter was old enough to ride a bike. She might have been about 10 years old, I don't remember. And she would ride on the sidewalk, and she could cross busy roads at that point. And she had a friend about a mile north of us that she would go visit on her bicycle. And one time she'd gone off to go do this, and I got a call on my phone, and it turned out to be a member of the congregation who saw her ride by on the sidewalk and just wanted, and knew who she was, and wanted to make sure that I knew where she was and that everything was okay. And I'm like, oh my God, what a community we're part of. And then I have to talk about, this is an example from my internship. I interned at the First Universalist Unitarian Church of Wausau. And on Wednesday nights in that church, they have, it's called Proud Theater. And it's a group that comes together and they put on plays, essentially, and twice a year. Once a year, it's something that is actual script, like they did the Matthew Shepard story. And then the other time, they write it themselves. So it's sort of an ad-lib kind of thing. And it's focused on the LGBTQ community and their allies. And it's all high school students. And so I had been tangentially a part of it during my internship. And I think it was the year after, I was actually at UW Oshkosh on a panel of clergy or religious professionals at the invite of the Gay Straight Alliance to talk about marriage equality and that kind of thing. And I was the Unitarian Universalist representative. So the discussion went as you might expect. And when it was over, this young man came up to me. And he said he knew that I had been a part of the church in Wausau. And he wanted to thank me and that church for having that group, because he grew up gay west of there in some rural little town on a farm, and he couldn't tell anybody that he was gay. But his parents thought it was totally fine for him to get in the car and go to a church thing on Wednesday nights in Wausau. So by doing that, he found his community, and it really supported him through a really troubled time. He was a freshman at UW-Oshkosh, and I think he'd only been there a couple of months. And so it spoke to me about how sometimes you're doing programs and you're not sure that it's having any impact, and you have no idea. And then recently, I know of a situation where there was a transgender youth that divulged to his parents in Appleton and got thrown out of the house. And he came to the fellowship up there, and the ministers found one of the couples in the congregation to take him in and help him out. They were used to doing foster children, so just all kinds of things that you can do in community. And in community, we're more likely to find companionship for the lonely, those new to town, those recently widowed or divorced, or who are working through the end of a long-term relationship. In community, we're much more likely to find someone who shares or is interested in our very divergent spiritual paths we have here. It takes a community, this community, to offer consistency and diversity so that we matter to the largest number of people. Now, covenant. This is where you get involved. You have to pull this out. So covenant is very, very important in Unitarian Universalist congregations, and in my opinion doesn't get enough playtime. So Unitarian Universalist congregations, if you don't know, are held together not by any kind of church hierarchy, any kind of dogma, or any kind of doctrine, but by covenant. And the covenant structure dates back to the early 1600s when our religious ancestors came over to New England from England. So this is it, folks. This is what holds us together. And so I want to make sure that you're aware that this covenant exists for Open Circle, and then just talk about the high points of it. So at the very top, we, the members of Open Circle Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, covenant to be a spiritual community where we can bring our hearts, minds, and deepest convictions, knowing that we will be respected, accepted, and loved. And I would say, knowing that we matter. We do this by living out our 7 principles, and you know them, you can read them. And then what I like after that is it talks specifically how we will do that together. And just the top statements are kind of the guiding principles, and below that are more of the tactics of how we're going to do it. I'll just read the guiding principles. We covenant to have open, honest, and inclusive communication within and throughout our membership. And then down below, we covenant to work together and make decisions using the democratic process. And if you didn't flip it over, there's more on the back side. We covenant to turn this agreement We covenant to turn to this agreement in times of harmony and in times of conflict to guide our words, actions, as we create and nurture our beloved community. The reason this is important is because if compassion is important and community is important, this is what we all covenant to do to stay in right relations with one another. It's not sugar-coated. It doesn't mean you won't have times when you disagree. That's normal. That's human nature. How you handle it is an indicator of how well we are as a community, and that, to me, is the beacon to the wider community that we want to lift up. And the fourth one is commitment. And frankly, if you believe that we each matter, then committing is easy. It just makes sense. Anybody would want to be committed to a compassionate community and covenant that matters. Now, commitment comes in many forms, and I'm going to summarize it into 3 groups, and they're not in any order of importance. They're all important. So the first one is just showing up. Make this a weekly thing. Come Sunday mornings to support the community and happen to stay for the sermon, rather than the other way around, where you kind of think of it as a smorgasbord and you look and see if you like the topic and then show up, because community comes first. The sermon is just kind of the icing on the cake. The second is helping out. Get involved in a way that works for you. It can be big or small. It can be continuous, or a one and done kind of thing. It all matters. Bring a snack. You guys are way into food. Bring a snack. Help set it up. Help clean it up. Be a greeter, and I don't mean Margaret's job as the greeter at the door, but there's lots of folks all the time. Before the service, we chat a lot. After the service, we chat a lot. Go up to folks that you don't think you know, or even ones you do know. Just make sure everybody has been greeted, because it's an indicator to them that they matter here. And then if you've got extra time, like say you're retired or a teacher that has more of your summers off or something, and some extra expertise, I've got to give a call out to the committees. Because the committees are what really make this place run. And if you're passionate and have a lot of ideas, that's where you should share them, because that's where they're most likely to happen. Witness for social justice. Show up and make your presence known. It matters. I haven't been here very long, and my only experience with this is the LGBTQ interfaith service that Scott was involved in helping to get pulled together, and I was very much happy to be a part of that, and it just made my heart leap at night at the library in the conference room where it was about 100 people, and I swear to God 50% were from here. I mean, that matters. It makes a statement that you care about this just by showing up. And then social action. In this case, I mean by social action is getting out there and doing the blocking and tackling to get things done at the food pantries, voter registration, all those kinds of things. There are many here who volunteer in the community. Ask someone to join you or see if you can join them some month. And then the third, and the one nobody wants to talk about, is financial commitment. Just so you know, we are funded by ourselves. It's just us. There isn't any larger organization. There's no endowment to pull from. And some things, of course, are free or nearly free. But to function as a compassionate community that matters, it requires space, this beautiful space, and infrastructure like computers and communications and staff. Now, the decision on what to give, of course, is entirely up to you. I know there are some denominations that dictate it. That's not our thing. It's totally up to you. And all donations are welcome, no matter what the size. But I want to share with you the Unitarian Universalist Association, which kind of guides us, provided some fair share giving guidelines, and to me, it kind of made a lot of sense. So their lowest level is called supporter, and this is how they describe it. The church is a significant part of my life and promotes my spiritual growth. To me, I could say the church matters to me. And so if the church matters to you, their suggested giving level is 2% of income. And they don't say whether it's your gross income or after your savings and your taxes are taken out. That's your decision, okay? But the whole point is to really wrap your head around 2%. It's 2 pennies on a dollar, okay? It's $2 for every $100 or $20 for every 1,000. So think of it this way. If you're on an income that, say, you get $1,000 a month, I'll do it on months because I couldn't think of a better way to do it, that's $20 a month to here. If it's $2,000 a month, it's $40, of course. If you're lucky enough to get $5,000 a month, then it would be $100 a month. That's what 2% really means and how it's tangible. Now, I know that some folks are not in a position to give this much. And I also know that other people are in a position to give a much higher percentage. And I want to stress that. I'm just trying to give you some guidelines that made sense to me. The point is to give until it helps. And 2% is a good place to start thinking about it, because the programming and commitments of this fellowship matter. So in closing, I want to say that we matter because Unitarian Universalists seek to live intentionally. We do not live in vain, like the poem said. It matters that our faith is grounded in a radically inclusive and proudly idealistic, compassionate ethic. It matters that we covenant together for a strong and vibrant community because the world needs to be guided by our example. And this year, please make a stronger commitment to this congregation because it matters. It matters to the world, it matters to us, it matters to me, and it matters to you. Thank you.